Hey, this is Gasakba Kepper for Project Illuminated, and today I want to make a video on the New World Order global control, how it's done, what they're doing to third world countries, and what that means for us. So right now I'm just enjoying some soy chocolate pudding, and actually this relates to the subject I'm going to talk about. But I have a video here that I want to start out with, which details the 6 principles of global manipulation. So if we can just watch a little bit of this, this will give you a great segue into what I'm going to talk about.
What is globalization? In the 20th century, the human race was confronted with such a natural phenomenon as globalization. Globalization can be defined as the process of concentration of power over all the mankind in one person or a small group. This process has been underway throughout the whole human history and is now near completion. Centuries ago, ancient Egyptian priests became aware that globalization can be controlled. They have worked out the overall principles and patterns of controlling society to achieve their own goals and headed up this process. Let us take a look at how globalization process is being controlled now. Principle 6. Weapon of war.
Now, I want you to pay close attention to how they really focused in this video on ancient Egypt, because there is a direct correlation between when Egypt fell and why Egypt fell, because it was planned to do so. So the global elite, the Illuminati as we call them, were even in existence then. Some people want to trace the global elite's history back, I think, to like the 17th century, which is not true. They were going all the way back to Babylon, and they were in control of the finances and more importantly, the spiritual occult practices that they kind of hoarded, and it reached its zenith in Egypt, Kemet, to where they knew that the Egyptians had attained such a high level of spirituality and occult secrets that information was taken, locked away, hoarded by the global cabal, and used to dominate the planet. And one of the things I want to point out to you so you understand that every president that we have had has been selected by the Illuminati. This whole idea of voting, you must understand that you are presented with 2 options. It's either bad or worse. And no matter which one you pick, the globalists win. So they basically have stacked the deck in their favor. You're playing with a marked deck. So there's no way you can win over who you pick. The problem that we have in this country is that we allow them to set the agenda. We allow the discussion and debates to happen based on the topics that they put forth. We need to talk about issues that are pertinent to what's going on. We need to say, let's talk about the global elite and the control of power. Let's talk about depopulation. Let's talk about weather control. Let's talk about racism, oppression. Let's talk about slavery and what that means on a worldwide level. So these are the issues that the candidates won't discuss, won't get into, because it exposes the whole infrastructure of what's going on. So let me move forward, because one of the things I want to also show, which is a really great article that came from Your Newswire, that talks about Castro and how he sees through the deception. He talks about how the so-called terrorist group is really created by the United States. They're nothing more than USA mercenaries. And this is part of what they do. We in this country are living under this illusion that everything is free and altruistic, and that we go over these third world countries, we bring to them food and resources and aid. But that's not true. What we have always done in this country was to create a fear, a scare factor, to where we always see those who are in these other nations, these other countries, as being primitive. They don't have democracy. They need intervention. So under the guise of spreading democracy, we send over our mercenaries to take over those countries. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But one of the things that we do on the side is to create these different types of fear, whether it be bin Laden, Osama bin Laden, or the situation in Iraq, or Saddam Hussein. or ISIS, we're creating another villain for the United States to fight against. And continually, this will go on and on and on. It'll never stop. Once we get rid of ISIS, they'll create another fictitious villain for us to focus our energies on. And all the while, these are nothing more than fabricated terrorist groups created by the United States. And Castro, in this article, calls this out brilliantly, and he talks about this, and he talks about Dick Cheney's involvement in this. So if you can find this, it's on yournewswire.com, and it really exposes what this ongoing tactic that we use, because you have to understand the globalists look at the world as a grand chessboard, and they're playing chess, and the object of the game is to take control over every sovereign nation on the planet and install their evil one world government. And if we can look here, I want to bring your attention to the pyramid of power, and you'll see how it's structured. At the very top is the world monarchy, and then below that we have the Crown Council of the 13. But what is of interest is the think tanks, and these are the organizations that do the most damage in places like Africa. You have the Trilateral Committee, you have the Council on Foreign Relations, you have the United Nations, the Bilderberg Group, and then more and more. But going down is the centralized banking institutions. So I need you to understand this. So when let's use Africa for example, because Africa is rich in natural resources. There's no reason why Africa should be a starving, bankrupt continent. And if you look here, you can see this is a map of Africa. And the natural resources that it has diamonds, has grains, has gold, has oil, cotton, iron. But all of these things here, even though Africa is rich in natural resources, Africa is heavily in debt. Who are they in debt to? The power structures. They're in debt to the centralized banking institutions, the IMF, the International Monetary Funds. Here is what they do. And wait, let me just give you another picture of Africa here. And you'll see that within all of these countries in Africa, you'll see that they have been colonized by the France, the Germans, the Italians, the Portuguese, the Spanish. It's ridiculous of how they have carved up Africa and bit by bit colonized this. And the way this is done is simply by, you have to understand that not just with Africa, but with other nations in the Middle East, wherever, they usually have their own state-owned banking institution. And that is money that the IMF wants, because the IMF wants that money to centralize its power and control. So what they'll do is they'll go into these countries, they'll invade these countries under the premise of spreading democracy or some other crazy notion that they have weapons of mass destruction in an attempt to capture the wealth out of that independent sovereign bank, pull the money out of that bank into the World Bank. And then what they'll do from that point is take over the country from its rightfully elected leader, put in a puppet government, a puppet leader, and make the resources or the money in the bank available to that leader, who usually becomes a dictator. And then he will squander all of the money in the bank. And we're talking billions and billions of dollars. So then what happens is the World Bank and the IMF will say, you know what, they'll say this to the country, you're financially bankrupt. We will lend you money and then give you corporations out of the United States to come in there and to build your infrastructure. We'll give you construction people. We'll give you, financial people to help to arrange your finances better. We'll bring in all kinds of companies like Apple, and they'll come in there, and what they'll do is they'll pay the workers zero. We're talking less than maybe $3 a week. And these workers will work without things like unemployment insurance, health benefits, and all of that. The money, which is the high profit margin, will go back into the corporations like Apple, and no one says anything. This is why the bulk of the corporations in the United States send all of their manufacturing processes over to these third world countries because they know they can set up these sweatshops, pay the people nothing, and get away with this. Do you know that there are children in Africa who are basically picking the cocoa bean that makes chocolate for companies like Hershey's, and these children who are doing this are getting paid nothing, and yet they have never in their lives tasted chocolate? Can you imagine where you're going to a company and you're working, let's say you're going to a peppermint company and you're working for this peppermint company and making practically nothing, and you've worked there for 10, 20 years and never tasted peppermint before in your life? This is what's happening. And even worse, what the United States is doing, besides going in there, taking possession of the centralized state-controlled banking institution, pulling that money into the World Bank, putting the nation in debt, then going, and from that point on saying, you're in debt, we're going to charge you a high interest rate because we're going to put in all of these American corporations that will pay the people nothing, and build an infrastructure which is a phony infrastructure. There's nothing there that will actually help people acquire wealth and to build and to become entrepreneurs. Nothing there for them to do that. It's all a phony facade to keep them in debt and below the poverty line. So what they'll do then is the United States will set up military bases and operations within the country itself, and to further that, they will create a destabilized not only economy but social system. So in other words, they will bring in Christian missionaries, Christians in there, who will then try to rid out the traditional African religion, Christianize them, make them all Jesus freaks, or bring in Islam, and then they'll have the various factions of Islam, Sunni or traditional, whatever, fight against each other, and then cause wars within the country itself, and then all of a sudden says, well, that country's got a lot of terrorism going on, and we have to further intervene and bring more troops in there and set up a more established military operation and base, and then they start bombing it and all of that. And that's what the United States does. And and put it to you this way, if the elected leader of that country does not play ball, there's two things that will happen. The United States will send in their crack SEAL team or whatever to assassinate the leader. And if they can't get to the leader, as case in point with Fidel Castro, they couldn't get to him, what they'll do is they'll try to create their dissent in the population and finance a political uprising to remove the rightfully elected leader of that country and put in place their puppet leader and dictatorship. And this has been done, as you see, throughout all of the countries in Africa. This is the same game plan that the New World Order, the global elite, have used to break up Africa, to destabilize its economy, to take it over, to rob Africa of its natural resources, to put it in debt. And taking things a step further, one of the worst things that they've done, which is a psychological warfare, was to try to eliminate and exterminate the traditional African religions, vis-a-vis taking out the African shaman, to instill Christianity, Catholicism, and Islam in there, and to create different factions of those religions to keep the native population fighting amongst each other about whose set is right. Is my religious set right or your religious set right? Well, let's battle over it. And then what the United States will do then is they will fund militarily now both sides. They will send armaments, and Nicolas Cage did a wonderful film on this where he played this character who was funded and did go to these third world countries and gave both sides military weapons so they could fight amongst themselves. And this is a common tactic of the global cabal to do this. So I've just outlined this for you, and I want you to understand that the freedoms that we have in this country come at a great expense of what we're doing to these third world countries, what we're doing to Africa, not only from a monetary perspective, but a psychological perspective, in destroying the culture, the religion, to put in place things that not only destabilize the country and keep the native inhabitants from gaining any type of wealth or building an economy of their own or a political system of their own, but also to destroy their mindset, to totally make them slaves of a religion that does not have their best interests at heart in no way, shape, or form. So that's all I have to say from now. I'm just going to go back to enjoying my chocolate soy pudding. And this is Kasant Ma Keparu for Project Illuminated, and that's all for now.